I'll give a little bit of background and then we can kind of jump in. So this is the Light of Infinite Festival. It's born of a different project I had called Don't Block Your Blessings, which was actually inspired by a letter from the Rebbe. And somebody had written the Rebbe, and basically he was, listing all the different things that he was going through and, requesting guidance. And the Rebbe's response just really resonated with me. And he had written that not to discount this person's hardships, writing to this person saying not to discount them, but I could tell the way in which you're writing that you're not appreciating the blessings that you have. You have a beautiful family, you have parnasa, and whatever the hardships would be. And he said, until you appreciate the blessings that you have, you won't necessarily be the recipient of new blessings. And I saw that as, don't block your blessings. I immediately went on GoDaddy and Instagram to see if that was taken. Somehow it wasn't. So I started this project called Don't Block Your Blessings, inviting all sorts of different people, from musicians, actors, and just people around the world to share sort of their, I was calling it cheat codes to happiness, like how they navigate the ups and downs of life, and how to maybe not block your blessings and what tools they might have acquired to bring in blessings. And it's been incredible. And some people, would write like, this has been so impactful, and like, just having to make this video, just me thinking of these different things and appreciating different things in my life. So it's been pretty incredible. And it was during COVID, so there also wasn't really in-person concerts or any sort of conventions or anything like that. So I built out these rooms on the website, and we had healers, musicians, and artists painting live. That was all around when my mom passed away. That kind of inspired me to do it. And then started this book series called Light of Infinite. It's 5 books. Today's the 3rd book came out, The Sound of Illumination, for Vayikra. And yeah, so this is part of the festival, but also part of this series that I do Elevate every day. And I know you're very much in the space, inspiring a lot of people with your wisdom and a lot of things touching on a lot of these concepts in mental health and in spirituality. And so kind of wanted to hear from you, what comes to mind, keeping in mind the theme. It's
interesting that you're telling me that I didn't know the backstory, that a lot of this came from the lockdown, when people were forced onto their computers all day and they were searching for connection. Because I have a very similar story. I think it was around this time of year, because Purim's coming up. So I remember I came back from an international trip right before Purim in 2020, and I remember going through customs and having to click on the screen that said, "Have you visited the Wuhan region of China?" Wu-Tang, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I don't know any Wuhan, I'm sorry. So, and then everything just shut down. And it was interesting. Not always, but for a long time, I'd wanted to delve into Shara B'Tochen, which is a section of Chayvis Alavavos, the duties of the heart, by Rabbeinu Bechai, which was written almost 1,000 years ago, but it's a classic. It's a perennial classic, especially the section called Shara B'Tochen, which is about trust in Hashem. And so I said, no one's going anywhere. I'm going to just sit on my computer every night, and that's what I did every night. And we're going to rock this thing. We're going to finish the book, and that's what we did. And that's how I spent the first 2 months of my lockdown. And it's incredible because, first of all, it changed my life, because I actually went through every word of the book in order, in a disciplined fashion, beginning to end, in a timely way. So obviously reading stuff like that is going to have an effect on me. And then it touched so many other people. And okay, why am I telling you this? Because obviously everything that happened in that time, the lockdown and all the obviously the people that we lost, it was terrible. Okay, I'm not minimizing that. At the same time, I have to admit truth. If I weren't forced into that really difficult situation, I wouldn't have learned the whole Shara B'Tochen. And then the thousands of people who learned with me Shara B'Tochen may not have learned. So, it's but this to me is they say when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But this is the problem itself is the solution. It's not just make the best of it. It's no, it's not make the best of it. It's if this hadn't happened, none of these blessings would have happened. So it's interesting. This full festival has a
Yeah.
similar
It was,
origin story.
yeah, it was like a global Shabbat, like we were fortunate enough to have Shabbat. So it's like this pause. And, I think of so many, I'm sure you think of all these things on Shabbat because you're like not going through your regular routine. It used to be music. Now it's more writing. And I'm like, I wish I could just, figure out somehow to compose it without writing. But yeah, so I feel like for a lot of people, it was a massive Shabbat. It was a massive reset, a very big pause, people working from home, realizing you could get so many things done remotely, but also shifting in the way we're thinking and the way that we're doing things on like a massive global scale. So yeah, I agree in terms of that. Yeah, Shar Bitachon is definitely an incredible book. I think in that time I was getting more into Rabbi Nachman, the Kutei Maran, and also Tanya, which is, I lived in Crown Heights and I wasn't so connected to the Alter Rebbe, like the teachings of the Rebbe at the time. Now I go back there for Shabbat and learn, the Kutei Or and all this Torah Or and the Kutei Torah, and it's like amazing. But what are some of the other Sfarim books that you're most connected with and that you think resonate with the most?
I did a 4-day
sharing.
Live stream last week. It wasn't literally 4 days, but for 4 days, every night I did a live stream. It was a fundraiser for Soul Words, for my organization. And you can even see the little glowing soul word. So every night I did a different topic. I did different topics, multiple topics, things that my audience, my virtual community enjoy. And the first night, 2 topics I did were 2 books which are near and dear to my heart. First one is Shara B'Tachin, which we mentioned, and the second one was Tanya, which you also mentioned. Those 2 books, and I mentioned them both as having had a profound effect on my life. I mean, Shara B'Tachin, I really only immersed in, like I told you 2-3 years ago. Tanya has been an obsession almost of mine for close to 20 years. So,
wow. So I wonder, actually, jumping into Tanya, because when I think about Likutei Maharan and Rabbi Nachman's, the foundation, like the core teaching, I guess, of Breslov, to me at least, is the Zamra, judging things favorably, but taking it to like, the most extreme level where it's all like you have to internalize, but it's talking about another person. So if you're viewing another person, and often we'll view somebody who maybe did something that hurt our ego or whatever, and we view it in this way that we almost see them at that moment as 99% bad, And so the Zamra is like taking that 1%, and just like the moon, when we say like, when we're sanctifying the new moon, it's really when it's at its smallest, not when it's at its most beautiful and
by the way,
so taking that 1%, and
today was second. So. And
yeah,
it's Chedesh Adar, which is Mishenichnas Ab Mar B'Simcha. So you got to put that in. Okay. So then when you have the little sliver of the moon,
no, very on topic. Exactly. So there we go. So seeing that sliver, seeing that 1% in that other person, of course, we're all also talking about within ourselves, and then seeing that and judging that favorably and kind of showering love on that, then you're able to like switch it from like the 1% good and 99% bad to like slowly seeing 99% good and 1% bad. It's just like that perspective shift, And I think that's at the core of the Breslov teaching. Throughout all the different Torahs, you could bring it in. That's how I view it. And I'm curious, Tanya, it resonates with me also so much. And also just seeing a lot of the parallels in the teachings. But yeah, I'd love to hear, what do you think, for somebody who maybe hasn't learned, or even if they are, but like what's one of the major teachings that you feel like is one of the core epic?
Tanya is the most demanding and most gentle book at the exact same time. That's the core. It's demanding in that it will call upon you to achieve spiritual levels that you hadn't even dreamt of. And in that sense, it's incredibly demanding. And at the same time, it is so realistic and validating about all of our defects and our twists of character. And it's just this really wild paradox where you have idealism and practicality totally fused together. So it's uplifting, but it's also like comforting at the same time. You know what? Actually, when you started off and you said that you were motivated by a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that you saw, where about don't block your blessings. That's how you translated the Rebbe's letter into your own words. But the Rebbe was basically saying to somebody, you're complaining about the blessings you don't have, but like, why don't you start by counting the blessings you do have, and that'll bring in more blessings. So I almost wanted to stop you because you said something that was so great, but I don't want to break your flow. We could listen to it back and hear exactly what you said, but it was something like the Rebbe says to the person, hey, you got to count your blessings, but without, I don't remember what word you used, but it's something like without invalidating, right? Do you remember the words you used?
To
discount.
Not to
Okay.
discount.
So that's such an art to be able to simultaneously demand from somebody and say, hey, man, you can do better, but without invalidating or discounting or being dismissive. Because it's easy to do one or the other. Like, it's easy to validate everyone. Oh, you're beautiful. Don't ever change. You don't have to do anything. God loves you, baby. That's easy to do. It's all, but it's also easy to do the other extreme, which is you're awful. You got to do more. You're unworthy. You don't even deserve to walk this earth until you shape up. And like, both extremes are very easy. What's very difficult is to validate somebody and say, you're good. I hear your pain. Your cause of pain is legitimate. I have empathy for you. And at the exact time say, and dude, you got to work really hard here because there's so much more that you can achieve. And that balance is such an art. And you see that in Tanya. To me, that's the essence of Tanya. And you see it, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is the descendant of the author of Tanya. So you see it in the Rebbe's teachings as well.
Yeah, I think that's what really resonates with me with Chassidus, learning the Alter Rebbe's teachings, and also the Likutei Sichot, the Rebbe's teachings around the Parshiot and everything that he teaches also, and all the Breslov teachings, is that it's, when I'm reading it, you see on Instagram people posting all these positive, in this healing wellness space, all these different teachings and thoughts and quotes. And when I'm reading Tanya, from back then, and Likutei Moharan, I'm just each one is just so much, there's so many gems in it. And I'm just wow, this is so mind-blowing. And like you said, I think it gives people a lot of chizuk. So even if it's some tochara, even if it's some especially when you're reading about the tzaddik or even the Benoni, and you're I'm not
it's
even,
easier to read about the
in-betweeners, and I can't even hope to be an in-betweener.
About the tzaddik because he already tells you that you're not expected to become one. It's off the table. And then you read about the Benoni, and then it's hold on, I'm supposed to become that. Right.
In some ways, I feel the only way to make sense of the whole thing, because if the tzaddik is he never sinned, or he didn't know, if he flipped his sins all into zechiyah, if he took, the whole thing is if you're serving Hashem and with fear, but also with love, then you can switch it rather than getting to a level playing field. You're actually rising from it. But if the Benoni never sinned, then how did the tzaddik did sin, So I feel in some ways it's the world is recreated at every moment. And this is my own take that, you could be you're finding your inner tzaddik. And at that moment, you could be a tzaddik. You could try to hope to continue those moments, choosing happiness, choosing being a tzaddik over and over again. But otherwise, to me, it doesn't really make sense between the tzaddik and the Benoni.
I have a very controversial opinion about, I think that the way that the Rebbe taught Tanya is different than the way it was taught historically. When the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim come back in the resurrection of the dead after Mashiach comes, they're going to be blown away by the way that Rebbe taught Tanya. The Alter Rebbe had a Sefer Shel Tzadikim, and it was lost in a fire. People think he purposely destroyed it. He didn't, but it was lost in a fire. In some ways, I don't want anyone to take this wrong, because this is not really actually, I don't mean this literally, but the way that Rebbe reinterpreted Tanya is almost like Sefer Shel Tzadikim. And I think it's because Mashiach is so close, and when Mashiach comes, we're all going to be tzaddikim. And I think that Rebbe started revealing ways how regular people can not only be the Benoni of Tanya, but can become a tzaddik. The Rebbe said that clearly, by the way, the Rebbe's Sunday dollars. Okay, so the day before the Rebbe had his stroke, which by the way is coming up, the anniversary of that is coming up this month, Chav Zayin Adar, the 27th day of the month of Adar, was when the Rebbe had a stroke. He was at the Ahel in Queens, at his father-in-law's resting place where he would go daven often. He had a stroke and he fell, and he didn't speak publicly again after that. The day before that, he was giving dollars, as he often would. He'd stand there all day, even in his advanced age, and give $1 for tzedakah to everyone who came by. There was a guy from Toronto there named Gabriel Aram, and he was publishing a magazine. He had like an executive magazine for, Hatzi-Shtatzi people. And it was a really unusual thing that he decided to make a whole issue about the Rebbe's birthday, because the Rebbe was turning 90 the next month. So he came to the Rebbe and he said, this was not a Jewish magazine at all. It's an executive magazine called Lifestyles Magazine. It's like a magazine, all the ads are like Rolex watches and, Rolls-Royce cars. So actually, I don't think Rolls-Royce advertises, but at any rate, it's that kind of Okay, so he says to the Rebbe, what's the Rebbe's statement? It's in English. You can watch it online. He says, what's the Rebbe's statement for the world, that we can include in the magazine? So the Rebbe says, the whole thing, the premise was that Rebbe was turning 90. It's the birthday article for the Rebbe turning 90. So the Rebbe said 90 in Hebrew is tzaddik. And the lesson is that every single Jew can be a tzaddik. In other words, he's trying to make it about the Rebbe. Like, oh, the Rebbe's so great. And the Rebbe flips it. I'm like, no, it's about all you guys. But then, remember, it wasn't a Jewish magazine. So he's like, well, what's your lesson? Because the Rebbe said every single Jew can be a tzaddik. So he's like, so what's your message for the rest of the world, for the non-Jewish world? The Rebbe did not pause. I mean, you can watch the video. The Rebbe did not pause a tenth of a second. And the Rebbe said the same message. Through their 7 Noahide laws, the 7 laws that were given to Noah, who's the ancestor of all humanity, every single human being can be a tzaddik. And that was the last day that Rebbe spoke publicly, the next day that Rebbe had his stroke. So that's, to me, like, really the Rebbe's message is lifting up the whole world, the entire world, to become that tzaddik.
It's amazing. Wow. Yeah, everything I hear, like I said, when I was living in Crown Heights, that's just how it goes. But like looking back at it, I'm like, I wish I had known all this. I wish I knew all the brilliance that were in these books, when I was actually there every day. But, that's how it goes. And then you go back and you appreciate it.
It's all in God's timing,
But yeah, one of my friends, David Ben Yehuda, I learned with a lot. He grew up on the Moshav Modi'in, the Karlach Moshav. But he's incredible when it comes to Rabbi Natan's books, the Likutei Halachot, the biggest follower of Rabbi Nachman. And he's always pushing me, because I have massive fear of public speaking. And, he was there when I was like trying to write these books and everything. But now I'm like pushing myself to speak all the time. I do a big dinner at Tiferet Teiman down the street in LA. If you're welcome to come for Shabbat dinner. But anyway, so this always stuck with me. He's like, you have to imagine that everybody's going through such a hard, all these different difficulties. So when you give over Torah, like in the way that the Rebbe especially exemplified, just always bring it to that sort of inspiring element. Because, the old school way, at least like Litvin, I went to yeshiva in Israel. It's like some of these things, you're like, well, I can't really achieve that. And then you kind of feel down. And it's like, it's not even in your grasp. But now I think it's just so important to focus on all the things that you can and reshifting these focuses. And just, I think the Rebbe was like, getting somebody to put on tefillin and getting women to light candles and all the just different things that can be such a massive, massive shift. And it's crazy because we were waiting for something to happen on a financial level just 2 weeks ago. And my friend has been waiting like for years. And finally this thing goes through and he calls me and he's like, I never lit candles in my life, like even when I was very, very religious. And I decided this Friday before Shabbat to like light candles. And I was telling him, I was like, you don't understand. It's the same thing with how Hashem views, and it's in this parsha coming up, where it's like, if your heart compels you to give, the offering, and it's not even about what you give, it's the heart that you give it with. And in the same way, it's like, it's not about doing if you're not doing anything and you do one little thing, the same way that I think that the Rebbe would view it and how Hashem's viewing it is like, that's bigger than everything. You know what I'm saying? Because that's one shift towards where you're trying to go.
The perspective of infinity. From the perspective of infinity, the present moment and the present action have absolute value, because from a perspective of infinity, everything is of equal value or of no value. If it doesn't have absolute value, then it has no value, because there's no such thing as relative value within infinity, because you can't have a fraction or a piece of infinity. So from that perspective, like, how valuable is doing the next mitzvah? What do you mean, how valuable is it? It's absolute value. It is everything at that moment.
Yeah, I think that, the Zohar's interpretation of Bereshit bara is like, out of beginnings, the world was created, So it's like, when you look at it, that the world is being recreated at every moment, then you can really see, if you think that you're going in the wrong direction, then you don't have, this one perspective is like, no, I'm already like screwed. This is the path that I'm going on, and it's dark and it's bad and everything's bad. But if you think that, okay, if the world's being recreated at every moment, then I can choose my reality at this exact moment and start to shift towards this other thing. And even if I fall one time, okay, but that next moment is a new moment to start again, and it's like, I think that's one of the things that help people the most, because you have to have that hope, and you have to have that realization that there's always that, chance to continuously choose the good, because there's always going to be the falls, and you can't get back in that.
Awareness of all we have is the present moment is so useful in so many ways. So you mentioned one way in which it's useful, that when we feel like we're on the wrong path, well, hold on a second. You're not on any path. I mean, the you that was messing up a second ago is not the you that is existing this second. Start fresh.
Right.
But there's so many uses to being aware of the absolute newness of every second. And one of the applications that I've been thinking a lot about myself and speaking a lot to others about, unfortunately, today a lot of people say that anxiety is a major part of their lives. And anxiety is pretty much just about not being able to be present, because I'm creating a personal mythology, like a myth is a story, is a narrative that a culture comes up to explain something that's happening. It's not that it's not happening. The phenomenon is happening, right? But the story isn't necessarily the real explanation. So it could be that my body is experiencing distress for any number of reasons. It could be I'm not eating and exercising right. It could be old trauma that I'm carrying. It could be for a lot of reasons. But then what the killer is the mythology. I create a narrative to explain it. And that is so self-defeating. And that voice that comes to us with that same story just creates so much wasted time, because instead of being in the moment and with you here and now, I'm up inside my head listening to that crazy myth. So one of the things that I do for myself, and I try to share with others, is to talk about how all we have is the present. That thing that you're catastrophizing about right now, it's not happening now. So it's not real. Like, just be here. Just be present. Just right now, what is happening? Like, and if it becomes too difficult, then break it down really, really small. Like, what kind of chair are you sitting in? Like literally make it manageable enough to contextualize yourself in the immediate present context. And then anxiety disappears. Now, I'm not claiming that the physiological symptoms disappear, because sometimes they're going to be there for various reasons. But at least our brains aren't creating these crazy narratives that are then amplifying those physiological symptoms. Anyways, it's the brain that makes everything so difficult.
Yeah, 100%. That brain, yeah. I mean, so this is my third book that came out today. This is the proof copy, but it's called The Sound of Illumination.
They say don't judge a book by its cover, but it looks like a good book.
Yeah, this is the second one, and this is the first one. So you can, it's funny, I think Mayor K posted, he wrote, yeah, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but he's like, I'm going to judge this one because it looks pretty cool. So, yeah, he wrote that. He's like, but I'm going to judge this one by its cover because I love it. So it's funny that you said that. But yeah, it's called The Sound of Illumination. And I was just like looking in the intro, and there's one line, like I wrote it already 2 years ago, but I had one line that said, ego is the death of wisdom. And it's sort of referencing two things. One is teaching from Rabbi Nachman, but on this verse in Dvarim, that is like, in the midbar, in the desert, you'll find a matana, like you'll find this present, and it's because the desert represents shtika, represents silence, silencing all these things that you're talking about that are in your head. And in other ways, it's also just, if we think we know everything in any situation and somebody's talking, let's say you can learn from them, or somebody else is telling you their experience. But even within our own experiences, if we can nullify the ego, then we can get that wisdom from that situation. But also just that shtika, like the chokhmah, the wisdom that comes from that, is because we have to like quiet all these things that are always in our head, because most of them are either worried, like thinking about something in the past that isn't serving us, that like we talked about, or these things that aren't going to happen anyway. And it's always these distractions from being present, Yeah, I love that teaching, the sort of thinking as because it's like matana is a present, but it like comes from being present and the silence of trying to get to that level.
A pun,
of
right?
You're
purposely making a pun.
Now, I am I have 2 kids, so it happens.
The presence, right? The gift of this moment, the present is the present. Yeah. You know what else helps you get present and get out of your head? It's very simple, especially for overthinkers. Get into your body and do a mitzvah. Just do a mitzvah. Do a physical action that is good. And don't worry about how you feel about it.
Yeah, it's always about taking action and reshifting the focus to others. It's like it's funny because you have to kind of go out and get help, and then a lot of times that's like, where am I at? Like, what am I thinking now? Is this like, am I doing better? But it's like this constant questioning of where we're at that sometimes keeps us away from where we could be, because it's like this obsession with, am I happy? Like, how am I feeling now? But really, like, the happiness comes from when you kind of like push that aside and stop thinking about that, because continuously thinking about it, makes it very hard to achieve.
There's a famous story in the Gemara about Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, the Tana, the great sage. He was from the era of the Second Temple. He was the leader of the Jewish people during the destruction. And he was like the Moses in his generation. So it says that when he was passing away, he said, I don't know which direction, which path they're taking me on, whether to heaven or to Gehenna. So it's a perplexing story, because he was such a great, righteous leader. I mean, why would he have any doubt that he had lived a righteous life? And there are many different explanations. But the Rebbe gives one particular explanation, which it's profound, and it's delightful. It's really delightful. The Rebbe says, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was a busy guy, and he was getting stuff done. You think he stopped and analyzed? No, he never analyzed. He was just doing. And therefore, at the end of his mission on earth, when he finally had a moment to reflect, he was like, I never considered before, did I live a righteous life or not? Because he was just so busy doing it. He wasn't thinking about whether or not it was righteous. He was just doing the next right thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it makes me think of like mitzvah lefanecha. It's always in front of you. It's always ahead of you. So you have to always stay in that thing. And I know the Lubavitch Rebbe always, when somebody would say, okay, I did this, like you sent me here to do this and I did it and it was incredible. It was always like, okay, but what's next? Like, that's amazing. Let's, be happy about that. And he'll, let them enjoy that moment, but never sit in that. It's like, okay, cool.
That's what I was saying. Which is an expression actually that describes the ascent of the souls of the righteous in heaven, that they go from strength to strength. But I don't think a lot of people realize, even people who are familiar with the Rebbe's teachings, what that means when the Rebbe would always tell people after they succeeded with something, go from strength to strength. A lot of people take it to mean like, oh, what you did, that doesn't count. Go do something. Come on, come back and impress me. Do something bigger. That's not what it means at all. Go from one strength to another strength. In other words, it's simultaneously validating the fact that what you just did right now is considered a strength. It's strong. And at the same time saying we want more, but precisely not because you failed. To the contrary, precisely because you succeeded. The success is creating momentum to breed further success. So it's not a rejection of the past accomplishment. Right. To the contrary, the greatest affirmation of the past accomplishment is to propel you to the next accomplishment.
Yeah, doubling down. Yeah, I mean, it makes me also think of the verse, and I'd love to hear your take. The Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, I think, is like, one of the most powerful verses. And, thinking about like setting Hashem in front of me at all times, like in that same way, like always going. But also, Reb Natan, like lenegdi, leneged, you could think about something, as something you feel is coming against you, let's say in life, thinking about the Shiviti, the equilibrium, to be able to realize that it's all for the best, and always having that sort of forward momentum, realizing like, okay, later on, I think maybe it was the Rebbe Maharash, somebody came to him who was going through a difficult time. He had an inn, this was, a long time ago, and he didn't know what to do because he was going to lose, he's like, I don't know, I can't keep this thing going. And the Rebbe Maharash said basically like, just prepare as if you're going to have hundreds of people for Shabbat, and just get ready for Shabbat. Just get the inn ready for a bunch of guests, get the food ready for a bunch of guests. And of course, this is the ultimate test of faith, because if it doesn't work, it's for sure 100% he's out, So of course, listening to the Rebbe, he's like, okay, I'm going to put my full faith in this. I'm going to listen. He knows best. So he gets everything ready. And right before Shabbat, this group, they're asking around. They don't know where to go. And he's like, well, actually, I can house all of you guys. I have a meal. It's like perfect. And he ends up making a good amount of money off of it, and also not only just surviving. And he asks the Rebbe, like, how did you know this? And he just answered, when you're on a higher level, you could see further, And it's like just thinking about that when you're setting Hashem in front of you and just having that emunah and getting on that higher level, to realize that any of the falls are for the elevation and they're all part of it. It's just another movement. When I think of my kid, who's like now an amazing skateboarder, I love, like, I saw that he understood that, okay, this trick, he was in YouTube University, so he's looking up the next kickflip or whatever, and he would tell me, okay, this is going to be 3 months for me to get this trick. I'm going to fall, and he knew he's going to fall for 3 months, he's going to miss it, and in 3 months' time, he's going to get it. And I think as kids and with sports, like, we realize that, and we're okay with it, and we know that's part of the thing. It's this gradual, process of falling. It's this gradual growth, but it's through the falling. And I think when we get older, we view it as failing instead of growth, the falling. And I think that's like, seeing that with my kid, I was like, wow, what a powerful lesson.
I just did a fundraiser last week. I mentioned to you before, the 4 days of live streaming, and I didn't reach my goal. And a lot of people were like, it was a very public thing. I mean, it wasn't like a quiet thing. It was very publicized, and I didn't reach my goal. And people were like, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, no, I'm thrilled. And I actually put out a video that after I put it out, people said that was like very, it encouraged them. They felt better from it. I said, last year I raised a certain amount of money for my organization, and I felt like the goal wasn't high enough, and that basically I had this lingering feeling afterwards that I could have done more. So this year, I more than doubled the goal. I mean, just to make it easier so you don't have to imagine. Last year, we raised $200,000. So this year, I made the goal $500,000, which is more than double. I didn't hit $500,000. I hit $400,000. But what I told people is, not hitting my goal was fine because it was so high that you see what happened. I doubled what I brought in last year. So
that's amazing. Yeah,
if I hadn't reached so high, I would not have. I would not have ever gotten to that goal. And I saw from each year, I worked it up incrementally each year with the fundraising. I started off as a complete one-man operation, so it was just like I didn't even fundraise. I just paid for everything myself, and then slowly I got some common sense and realized I can't be a one-man show. And as we expanded, we started hiring more staff, which costs money. People expect to be paid, right? And then every time I would raise more money, I would be able to get more help. Then I would be able to accomplish more, to be able to raise more money and get more help. And it just became this virtuous circle. So there's so many lessons for me in that. And by the way, I recommend to everybody, money is a big teacher. Put yourself in a situation where you're forced to come through with a financial goal, because it is a motivator, and it's a real motivator. It's not something you can push off, and it's not something subjective. It's very quantifiable. It's just, for a lot of spiritual people, we get afraid of money, or we think it's a distraction from our spiritual growth. It's not. It's a really good way of forcing you to grow. So I recommend to everyone, whether it's a fundraiser or some other goal that you have, or it could even be a goal about tzedakah, that you want to give a certain sized gift. You want to make. I have a friend who had a goal that he was going to give away $1 million before he turned 30, and he did it, and now he's given us millions of dollars. So, and goals are good.
That's amazing. Yeah, it makes me think of that teaching where it's like the only thing that you have is like the charity that you give, because everything else comes and goes. But that it's like, okay, that I gave to somebody, that I could say is like the money that I have, Yeah. Those mitzvot. So 100%. So I don't want to take too much of your time for a 30-minute session. So I don't know if you want to share anything to close off or anything, but this has been amazing.
Midnight Mitzvah that I go to pretty religiously, which, I'm going to leave to momentarily. So it's a good stop because it's the latest minion. Yeah. But as far as like a parting shot, parting words, I can say anything I want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is not really anything we've discussed so far, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it short and sweet, and it may not make sense because I'm not going to explain much. We live in a day and age when there is more access to more information than ever before and more confusion than ever before. There's so much information, misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, absolute garbage, and then there's really good stuff. And what I want to encourage every single person to do who has access to social media, and if you're watching me right now, guess what? You have access to social media. I want to encourage you to be part of the solution. And don't just be passive and consume information. And don't even just be more discerning about only consuming healthy and wholesome stuff, which is good. You should do that. But become active and put out healthy and wholesome stuff, because we have to overwhelm the ratio of garbage with lots of holy and wholesome and healthy and uplifting messages. And don't think, well, it's not such high production value. Oh, I don't really have such a profound thought. Oh, it's a repost. It doesn't matter. If there's something that's motivating you and that you feel good about, just doesn't have to even look good. You just pipe it up, put it out there, and touch somebody with it. That's, to me, like the call of the hour right now. We have an army all over the world of people who have the most powerful weapon ever devised. These little devices, we could cause a revolution in the entire world. So if just everyone who has access to technology will just put out really positive, spiritual, uplifting messages, we'll conquer the world in a good way.
100%. Global consciousness shifting it towards the positive.
Totally attainable.
100%. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. It's been fun for me, and I think a lot of other people enjoy it because I keep getting these messages I see on top saying that they loved it. So thank you so much.